Welcome back to part three. This should be shorter, but you never know. Um, so we've talked about Trump. Oh, one final thing about Trump. Epstein files, forget about it. Um, it's not a thing. It never was a thing. Was one of his friends was a sex offender. You know, I have acquaintances and friends who have done bad things too. Um, Protect their anonymity. And they're not people from, the fellowship. They're just people who've, very publicly crashed and burned. So, yeah, where NBC News was involved, and that's enough. That's about all I will say about that. But yeah, it's people's demons like that don't become conspiracies. They're hidden demons. People don't like Epstein don't broadcast what they're doing. They don't take. They don't recruit. They may find people like themselves, but they don't have client lists and spread the news that join my perversion. They don't do that. That's not how that disability goes. It's a secret. And they don't it's like, yeah, if you know one, that doesn't mean you are one. So yeah. So enough with the Epstein stuff. There's very real things, and he's not going to live to see much of it anyway. If the people who are talking about his health know anything, which brings me to politics, the election. The scuttlebutt is that J.D. Vance has got the if he's a sitting, that he'll be the nominee. That's what the polls are saying, and frankly, if he is a sitting president, and he probably will be, yeah, he's the nominee. Just forget about it. And then whether the Democrats win or not depends upon whether somebody runs against him. Because if somebody runs against Vance, then the Democrats win. Doesn't matter about the rest of it. That's like the key thing. If you especially if the economy's doing strange things still, and it's doing strange enough things now that it will be doing them then. So, you know, J.D. Vance will not get his own 4 years, but he will be president. So, yeah. So the only question is, who beats him? And people are saying, "Oh, the Democrats are in such disarray." Compared to what? What's your baseline? I mean, if it's J.D. Vance and J.D. Vance is a sitting president, what's the economy going to be like? There are predictable factors, and they don't scream a second term for the Republican regime. So, it'd be like a Ford if Gerald Ford was as awkward as J.D. Vance. So, and maybe JD on his own may shine, and if that's the case, good job, JD. But does JD have a vision? I don't know. Do the Democrats have a vision? I don't know. You know, Here's the thing about vision. Parties, the Green Party has a vision, and I've been part of that vision, and most of what I do and believe in is in the Green Party, but they just don't know how to do the execution. They'd be a better movement with the Libertarians in a new coalition than trying to, win it all. They're too much of a proportional representation party. That's where they succeed. They don't succeed as a majority party that well, unless they're part of a coalition. Because not everybody, goes that way. It's not the personality aspects, social aspects of being a Green are never going to be the majority. Never, ever, ever. It's got to be part of a larger coalition party or larger governing coalition. And, rumor has it that I may have at one time this year thought that, running as a Green would be a good idea. It may be. I'd have to run against Chris Van Hollen in the next election, and I like Chris. he's not a friend, but he's an acquaintance. And you know, I've burned those bridges to the Democratic Party before. I'm not so sure I want to do that again. Not that I would, you know, win, and I'm sure that I don't want to do a campaign statewide. Those are worse than a presidential run. Presidential, as Donald Trump's staff noted, it's easy to run for president. You know, it's easy to file to get on the ballot in all the states, and you know, and set up fundraising and raise some money. It's hard to run for Senate. It's impossible comparatively. Worse is running for a House. You know, you're running against people with networks there. You know, and the all the aspects of running for House are just awful, and the Senate as well. Running for president's easier. So, I mean, family members have said, "Why you want to run for? You know, you sure you can run for president? You haven't run for anything else. President's easier." It really is. So the question is, what makes a good candidate? It hasn't. You know, the Greens have policy. The Democrats don't. I mean, the Democrats are as neoliberal as the Republicans were. The neoliberals still have not yet left the Republican Party. I don't think they're starting to. And if that's the case, then you know, then the Democrats will run a neoliberal candidate. Except I don't think being a neoliberal is great if you're fundraising. If you're a fundraiser and you're a neoliberal and nobody else is, and you don't have that big network, they're going to fund the neoliberal. You know, they funded the Clintons. You know, and they'll fund somebody with grassroots support. They're not stupid. That's why they you know, gave money to Trump, and you know, and Trump had a movement of people who rejected neoliberalism, and he was, you know, he has killed neoliberalism, or at least spanked it a little. You know, it's on its heels. So, you know, can it come back? I don't know. There'll be a different kind of internationalism. We need to grow past that kind of capitalism. You know, we're at an inflection point. Why waste a good revolution and to just bring back what we had under the Clintons, and under Obama and under Reagan, and you know, the regime since 1986 and 1982 has not been good for everybody. That's why you have Trumpism. You seriously have Trumpism for a reason. And people will pay for tariffs, especially if you can figure out how to get rid of their other taxes. That's the key. Trump's not into comprehensive things. And, you know, if somebody offers a comprehensive tax reform that makes it possible for people to pay their tariffs or their value-added taxes and still feed their families, then, you know, and go away from that libertarian conservatism that says everybody needs to stand on their own. It's like, no, it's just, you know, we need the children and we have to fund the children adequately. That means not just funding childbirth or having daycare. It means making sure people, daycare is part of it, but people have to have adequate money or systems to live and feed their children and have clothes for work funded by their employer. All of that, by the way, funded by their employer. So their employers need to pay the taxes, and then, you know, but then write off, make tax exempt those purchases, and make the taxes high enough so that they're going to make those purchases. So, yeah, the system needs to change, and it needs to be more. We need to change how we do work so it's not capitalist. So everybody doesn't have to be homo economicus, because it's really the entrepreneurs that are homo economicus. So says, and so I'm going to read more about for my book, Michael Faucon, who made some interesting comments about libertarianism and the idea of economic man. So it's the book that wants to be written, that I've got to figure out how to write it, and who to write it with, and whether having being in a PhD program helps me do it or not do it. And that's yet to be determined. But leading us toward that kind of tax system, if somebody says that, I'm with their campaign. If they don't, maybe I'll run, or maybe I'll try to find a way to get that idea out there and find somebody who embraces it and will hire me or support me. One of the two. I don't care either way, as long as it happens, because it wants to happen. So, but here's the thing. The parties, the Democratic and Republican parties, the Republicans don't have any idea at all, except to exploit people who are pro-life, a number that's shrinking, and to break the back of neoliberalism and taxation. They're not coherent. Trump made them less coherent because Trump is incoherent. And they don't have any great thinkers because they're a coalition party, and neither do the Democrats. They're making their money on getting contributions to beat the Republicans and saying, I'm not them. But they haven't come up, they've got some core principles that they never seem to enact. They're for immigration reform, but they never seem to enact it when they have both houses of Congress and the presidency. They say it's job one, but it's not. Every issue that the Democratic Party goes with is all about trying to win elections. Governing has, infrastructure was the one thing they did. They haven't succeeded in enacting anything else. And infrastructure is easy as long as you can have the votes to get past the filibusters and then make sure there's enough pork that nobody undoes them. Just crossing that line, and then infrastructure takes care of itself. Funding it, probably needs a gas tax. And, going back to the beginning of tape one, global warming is going to have to radically change our infrastructure, and that's going to be expensive, and it's going to have to take something having to do with employers wanting it and big companies. The capitalists or the corporatists, the corporate world has to see that, if we're going to survive as a culture, or at least not be totally disrupted by the weather we have now, that something has to be done. And that something's going to have to get rid of gasoline-powered cars and coal-powered energy. And it's possible. We're heading that way. If you've got any kind of visualization, you can see what's going to happen. But, capitalists who are chasing months, not years, won't see that. Finding long-term vision is the key. And capitalists may or may not fund that. The people might. It might take a revolution, but it's going to happen anyway because, as Marx said, capitalism eats itself. And especially when the capitalist party has decided that it wants to eat neoliberalism, which is the heart of defending capitalism, they just haven't offered an alternative. And once an alternative is cogent, it will win. And the Democratic Party, which is neoliberal, isn't going to, they want to be woke and neoliberal and hope that combination wins elections. This is why people say the Democratic Party is in a bad shape. It's not. It's always in the same shape. Chuck Schumer wants to win. And he wants to win with people that have his ideologies. There's not that, the majority never has that ideology. And once you prostitute yourself on the electoral financing field, you won't get it. That the Democrats are in disarray. Yeah, they need to have a leader come forward, and it's not that time of the year yet to say, okay, this is the vision, and then they have to not mock the vision. TBD. Thanks for listening.